Hi everybody, welcome back. This is our visual development class here at Fullerton College, and I'm doing our lecture today. This is instructor Phil Demetriadis, and as you guys know, we like to pick a artist every week and take a look at their work. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you a really talented artist. Her name is Victoria Ying, and I want to show you, she went to Art Center and she's been working at Disney Feature Animation since, okay? What's important, the reason why I picked this artist for us to look at this week, well, I really like her style, but what's more important is that her style is transitioned and influenced by two other very, very famous artists. So I need to show you their work first so you get a better understanding of the style that she picked up. So what are the common questions I get from students that are in entertainment arts that are either doing layout design, digital painting, development art, character design? One of the common questions I get is, how do I get into the industry? And I always give this same comment back, but nobody wants to effing do it, okay? Find somebody's work you really like and emulate it and copy it. There's nothing wrong with that. The great masters did it in Europe, okay? The American illustrators did it at the Brandywine School of Art. The other American illustrators that didn't go to Brandywine, that just came up and were really talented, they did it. They looked at people, and that's how you learn, and it still works to this day. If you find people's work that you like, and you learn their little tricks and trades, okay, and techniques, and you apply that into your work, I'm telling you, that is how you get really good at something, because then guess what happens? What happens if you study the way Manet paints? Okay, and you look at all his work over a time period, and you copy every piece. What's going to happen? You're going to start to paint like him a little bit. Not maybe a master of brushstrokes, because he might have 20 years of painting experience and flicking his wrist and knows exactly what the touch and feel of a loaded brush feels like. But you will pick up the other little tricks like light, technique. When does he kill shadows? When does he have fuzzy edges? How does he use foreground, midground, background? What are his shape variations and composition? Every artist has different abilities for composing and for setting up their storytelling. It's almost like everyone is their own unique fingerprint, right? Right. So let's take just a couple pieces here. Let me show you a couple things from Victoria. I came across that. I was like, that's so much fun. That's excellent, right? Very nice. And we'll take a look at her work a little bit later. Okay. There's something else there. And she has a lot more detailed stuff, but then she also has a lot of character stuff as well. Let's see what this one is right here. Look at that. I believe that was done for, any clues? Excellent. That's right. You can only tell by the long hair going all over the floor, right? That's a great little development color key right there. Okay, so Victoria, and it'd be awesome if we could ever contact her and see if she wanted to come in and be a guest speaker or whatever, right? But I'm just going to put my betting intuition on the table, because I'm going to look at two other artists and show you two other people that happened to work together. There were huge influences that probably influenced Victoria's style and brought her to where she is. So again, coming back to that same question, what's funny is I've met with about 5 students over the past couple weeks in my office, and I usually get the same question, which is, how do I get really good to where I can go to CTN and blow people away, which is a Creative Talent Network Expo, right? Or how do I get a job and go right into development or whatever? And one of the answers to that question is this. It's this simple. There's not a golden hidden key, but secret. If you can mimic somebody's style and you do it successfully enough to where you can produce it quickly and in a timely manner on a regular basis, you will not have any problems being able to find some quick jobs. Okay? But the only thing is you have to do it in a certain, rational reasoning, right? If you can't paint that well, you don't want to aspire to be the next Dylan Cole, okay? Or if you have a problem composing because you only like comic books and you want to be Sparth, the next Nicolas Bouvier, you can't do that either, because you only do comic books and you've limited part of your education. Or I've had a couple other students that are like, all I love is Japanese anime. That's all I want to do. Well, there's not much of a niche for Japanese anime here. Okay, so there's some limits there. So that's when I say the reason part. Okay, so first thing I want to do is let's take a look. It's so hard to go between the two here, but first thing we need to do is look at this wonderful lady right here. Okay, this lady and then the gentleman I'm going to show you are two artists that work together back at Disney that help sort of create and move a style of working in graphic matters and means with color to the screen. Okay, so this is MaryBlair. All right, hi Mary. It's funny. That was like the nicest photo I found of her, and then the other photos, she always looks sort of pissed. Okay, not pissed, but like another one. There she looks a little bit not as young, right? But there she is at Disney. Okay, so let's oops, I'm gonna move that to trash. Let's go through here and let me select everything here. Let's take a look at some of MaryBlair's work. Unfortunately, I wasn't able. It's actually pretty hard to find, and there's a limited amount of work out there. So let's just start here. So MaryBlair was probably most known for, she had a real graphic sensibility in the way that she worked. She used a lot of vibrant colors. Now this relates to me because this was my era as a kid. Growing up in the mid-'70s, I spent a ton of time, and in Southern California, going to Disneyland. It was a lot cheaper back then, and I remember literally walking by and going into this gift store all the time because we would always go over on the, well, It's a Small World was like the makeout ride, okay? So that's where all the guys and girls would go and whatever, and you'd go on that ride. But I remember always seeing the art, and then especially being inside It's a Small World ride, all the cutouts and all the designs, all that was inspired by MaryBlair, okay? And all that ties back into her influence in working for features. So it's sort of hard to see, but there was this golden time in animation where some of the artists that were working in animation were also working in the development of Walt Disney Imagineering and Design, which is WED, right? Which is their theme park development. So, and that still actually happens today because one of the, oh gosh, what's his name? One of their two brothers up at Pixar, and one of them,
Joe Ramp.
Ramp, thank you. Joe Ramp, and then the other one is, Jeremy Raft, that's right. For some reason, it's Raft with an N there, right? R-A-N-F-T. Well, Jeremy went to school here, and he studied under Michel Van Rij. And he learned sculpture, and I guess they were both from Orange County, and then he ended up later on going up and working at Pixar, and he's most notable for doing all the character sculptures for Ratatouille, okay? But it was cool. Where I'm getting with this is I ran into him here one day in the hallway, and I looked at him and I'm like, I know this guy's face. I know, and then all of a sudden Michelle's all, hey Phil, you're in the industry. This is Jeremy Raff he's one of my students who works at Pixar. And then boom, and then I knew exactly who he was, and he was such the nice guy. And I'm like, I got a bunch of friends at Pixar that worked with me at Big Idea and at Disney here, and now they're up there, And I told him who they were. He goes, oh yeah, I know that guy. I know. Daniel Lupas, I know this guy, and it's just a small world, right? And we were talking, and I said, what are you doing out here? What? I'm getting back to this. And
That's the joke. It was it's a small world.
Oh, okay, I know, not that. It's a small world, but yes. And then he told me he was working on theme park stuff. So even still to this day, artists that are at Pixar and other places of Disney, they get moved over to Imagineering. I want to make that comment because it is a small world, and this is exactly what no pun intended. I actually wasn't even going for the pun. I thought I said something like really offensive for a minute, Anyway, but what's really cool is when I look at this, this was new. This was like really cool, and all this design effort came from this. It came from this style of drawing and designing, and still to this day, Dominic Luis, and there's a bunch of other artists up at Pixar, they still work like this and they think like this. So there's nothing wrong with having this type of graphic manner and approach, because part of this blends into creative storytelling like this, where you sort of have fun, it's this sort of passive-aggressive relationship with shapes, but a little bit of abstract shape language and storytelling as well. But it doesn't have to go too over the top, because a lot of it also is being so expressive. There's no line, you just big, beautiful shapes and really nice colors that really read. And to me, that's the thing that I tend to notice a little bit more about this particular style. It's simple contrast, simple shapes, simple visual reads, and that's it. And that's what's really nice about it. And if you go through, there are a couple books out. I actually have one in my pile of many books at home on MaryBlair, and actually I couldn't find it. I know it's there somewhere. I remember I brought them all into class. And I think I brought them MaryBlair, and then I came back and I didn't put them on my rack in my studio. I just piled them on the floor like this. And then my daughter knocked them over. Anyway, so now I got to find them. I came home one day and her and her 4 friends had all of the art of books open, and they're all in them, and they're like had paintbrushes and stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? You know, but they weren't drawing inside them. They were getting ready to copy them on paper. But anyway, good times. So when you look at a lot of the work that she's doing, it's just really simplistic fun. And here's the thing that some of you, because I know the renderers, usually they're the male students that might look at this and they go, I can't do that. That's freaking easy. Try it. It's actually not. It's actually a little bit harder because you have to simplify your approach to everything. And if you learn how to think and that's, I was going to say, if you learn how to apply and work in a simplified manner in everything, you're much more successful. And I can even attest to that after all my years of working professionally and now being here as an instructor, and I still freelance in our industry, right? I'm 45, and trust me, I sit down and I still want to render the hell out of things that don't need to be rendered. Because it's just this addiction. It's this, you're like an illustration background and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to make that leaf like the best leaf in the world. And then you realize you're on the far left side of the screen and no one even cares because your subject matter is on the far right side of the screen. And where's your biggest area of contrast, right? And where's your focal point inside your story? So there's a certain benefit for going back and looking at the style of work here and looking at the simplicity of it and seeing how it transfers. Okay? So what was cool about this, and this is what I could 100% attest to, is when you're sitting on a crew with like 10 other artists and you're working on developing a film and an idea, and you all are given an idea and you have to bring it and present it in the crit room every 2 weeks, and then you put a bunch of your artwork up, guess what happens? You get influenced from working with others. And that influence actually rubs off on you and the other artists around you. And I give you a perfect example of that. Michael Spooner was one of our guest speakers, right? Michael Spooner was also my mentor, okay, for 3.5 years at Big Idea. Michael and Paul Felix worked together and were sort of developing and working hand in hand back in the early 80s using that technique of Prismacolor pencil on tracing paper. And that pretty much revolutionized the way the Disney feature went into from the late 80s and definitely 90s into the 2000s. And so that had a huge effect on the way people were working. One little technique of a pencil and tracing paper sort of revolutionized the way the development was going. And then Paul came along and started putting characters in his environments and telling stories, and nobody had really ever done that to that point. And so that changed things. But imagine going into a crit room, and there's a competition in there. It could be a friendly competition, but it's a positive competition. And this is, I think, one of the things when you get to certain schools, like Art Center, in some other schools, right? I mean, I didn't go to Art Center. I went to Cal State Fullerton. But one of the negative things I've always been frustrated about in crit reviews is when you're sitting there and you put a bunch of work and effort into your piece, and you're next to somebody who was too busy playing Xbox and didn't do the work that they were supposed to do, right? I'm not saying that happens at all different Cal State and university levels, but the positive thing about being in a studio is you're already working with somebody who's a pro. They want to keep their job. So they're all from different backgrounds. Some are from Europe, France, but the common thread is they're all pros and they're going to work their ass off to do work that's really good because they want to maintain their position at that studio, right? So because of that, you start looking at each other and you start to develop little theories and traits and find out little techniques. And there are some artists like Michael Spooner, Robert St. Pierre, and some other artists I know, they like to share that stuff. You can go in there and sit down and talk about, hey, how did you paint this background? What did you start with first? Did you work from light to dark? Did you work dark to light? There's so many variances there, and all that stuff comes from the ability. That's why I tell a lot of you guys that are in here, when you go get your first job, call me like 4 months later so you can tell me how amazing your skills have improved. Because once you're sitting there and you're doing it 8 hours a day, your skills are like a little rocket ship and they take off, okay? And you just get better and better, okay? But here's a bunch of Mary's work, and, it is simplified, but at the same time, look at that. That's beautiful right there. Look at the colors and how bright that pops off the page. That's really hard to pull off, and that's very difficult to get that simplicity but mixed with, a level of design that makes sense. And one of the things that Mary did outside of working in development and outside of doing the theme park stuff is that they had the other wing, which was Golden Books. And I worked with a lady whose name is Annie Gunther. And Annie Gunther also came from this time period. She was separated from the men and worked in line cleanup way back in the day. And, she illustrates some of those books too. And that was a dedicated, so some of these actually might even be copies of some of the books that they did, but some of it's also development art, okay, from everything they were doing with Walt. Okay, so, and some of these I just couldn't get in terms of quality too high res. I looked everywhere and it was just really hard to find what I could. But again, if you look at this stuff and you start copying it, and you look at the colors that are being used here. Okay, so step back from the technique of the simplicity and think about the colors that are being used. Okay, every one of these has complementary color schemes in them. And this is a great example where you have blue on the top, you have, look at that, red on the bottom, blue here, red against white, areas of contrast. Look at the composition, everything, all the swirls are bringing us back down here into the foreground. This swirl's bringing back, this tree is arched right at the character. I mean, everything's planned out, so it's a medley of composition, it's the simplicity issue, then combined with the color theory involved. That's really hard to pull off and can be very difficult. I mean, it's hard to go in there and throw black in and break the rules of atmospheric perspective and then come back in and throw a white leaf with a purple leaf on top. But guess what? There are artists out there that can do it, and they can do it successfully. And when it looks good, their work looks awesome. And then especially into some of the princess designs. Very stylistic approach, okay? So now we have Mary doing characters as well, and incorporating those into the story. I mean, if you look at this and you're like, hey, I could do that style, do it. And make 10 samples in your portfolio, and I guarantee you'll be getting work as a children's book illustrator on the side. 100% guarantee. This is fun. Kids respond to color in simple shapes. Kids don't respond to things that are over-rendered. Okay, they look at it and they go, why does it look funny, Dad? That's what my daughter does. When I'm grading your guys' assignments, she used to come by and she'll stand behind me and I pull up work and she'll go, and I'll go, okay, what's the theme? And she'll tell me. Pirate restaurant. Next one, what's the theme? I don't know. It looks like a Jack-in-the-Box that burned down. So it doesn't matter if it's Maya or it's art. She can look at it and identify it, and she's giving me the honest, I'm not having my daughter do our grading, by the way, but I'm just going over some of the basics here, okay? So I remember this as a kid, too. This was a map they would give you, and I used to have this when I was a kid. They'd give it to you when you came off of the ride, and the gift shop was right there. Oh, it's excellent. Brings back old memories. So there's the golden book, okay? So that's the level she could go to, but part of that right there is just refining what you had. What's really impressive to me is that she sat down and you had to put your color down. We're not talking Photoshop here, folks. You had to commit. And there's something about committing to things, like working on one layer in Photoshop and committing to your work and not having 58 layers there to go back through and pick through things. There's something there that you learn very quickly. And it's a confidence with using your brush, knowing the different brushes you might have, different brushes with different hair and how they load. You know what a load is when you dip it. Some brushes of different hair absorb different colors differently, and understanding what brush to use. And when you touch it down to illustration board, how is that going to work and the overall effect? And then how do you come back in and pencil in detail and get little ground like that? Do you do that before or after the characters? So many thoughts, and so there's so much there that maybe your generation won't get because you guys are all in a digital generation, right? Trust me, if MaryBlair and some of these other artists and Eyvind Earl, some of the other people, if they had Photoshop open to them, they probably would have just, crapped their pants, because it's so amazing what you can do with it. It's unlimited, right? And you guys are being exposed to all that. But here's the hard thing, right? This is why I tell you guys as artists, right? Go take a painting class. Go take a watercolor class. Why? What does it feel like to have a brush fully loaded and to hit canvas? What are your limitations with that? You want to look at something really cool? Go look at the Chinese and Japanese masters that do their scroll work and do some of their signage and their historical paperwork. It's mastered down to a science of understanding all that. We're talking about brush control, and we're working on a digital application in either Painter or Photoshop where you don't have that brush control, and you have, like me, you got 100 different brushes for 100 different things, but figuring out, MaryBlair probably used like 4 brushes on this. Okay? Well, she could use more, but you understand what my point is, right? Beautiful piece, by the way. Okay, there's some more goodies. Look at that. Excellent. So this is a huge style that's been going on. This is one of my big arguments I've always had with games, is that games tend to have like the same over-rendered style that we see coming out of a lot of portfolios. And if you go on to Creative Uncut, right? Is it .net or .com? Creative Uncut, right? I forget what it's site. You know the site, Creative Uncut, right, on the web. Just Google it. Everything's like, is really realistic in games. Nothing wrong with that. But in animation and in visual development, you have this opportunity to bring style to the table and to have different looks. You can translate that right there into 3D. No problem. Okay, and if you can do that and pull it off, you make things look really interesting. And I think a really great example of that, to me, one of the more recent films that really did that, touched on that very nicely, was The Incredibles with Brad Bird. Because when you look at a lot of the stylization of the characters and a lot of the graphic approaches, and they were able to really transfer that to a three-dimensional media really professionally and make it work. Okay? All right, let's do some more good stuff. A little hard to see there. Okay? So that's MaryBlair. So before we get back to Victoria, let's finish looking at what else opened up here. Oh, this was one of the, back in 2014, they had an exhibition, and this is, I found this site when I was looking for reference, and it had a lot of her work up here. It was pretty cool. And then, look, March 3rd to 6th. That ended a couple days ago in Berkeley, okay?
So if you have a time machine.
Yeah. But it's funny because what happens is a lot of the artwork transfers around, back and forth all over the place. So anyway, all right, that's MaryBlair. So then let's take a look at this little genius right here. Now, I really relate to this work a little bit more than Mary. I like Mary's stuff, but I just sort of wasn't trained like that, okay? But I want you to understand these two work together. They were from the same genre and area. And this gentleman, his name is Eyvind Earl. Just sounds old school, doesn't it? Eyvind! Hurry up and finish your dinner. No, there's something about, just, I don't know, I wish I wish I knew more about this guy, but when I go in and I start looking at his design sensibilities, see how this is really similar to what MaryBlair is doing? And there's a couple pieces in there that almost look identical. But the one thing I liked about Eyvind is he started branching off and he started doing some of his own work that he was doing in the studio. And then he was doing prints out in gallery. And I'll show you his gallery work. And some of the work he was doing was selling like hotcakes. And it was really, really difficult to get your hands on. Okay, but look at that. Do you see the similarity in the shapes and the color and the simple storytelling that's being done there? It's a dragon arching back with flame, and it's like and then you see, the good guy, the knight or whoever on a horse. I don't even know what all that is in the back. It looks like it could be a flower or gold. I don't know what it is. I don't have to know. It's just there, and there's a certain freedom in the piece that makes it work really well. Okay. Here's where we start getting into some of the really cool stuff that he was doing. He started working with perspective, and he started getting into a lot of graphic shapes. And what else is being displayed in this piece here, folks, that we talk about quite a bit? Atmospheric perspective. See how things are really dark here? And look at how much lighter they're receding back. Okay? And then what's really cool is he just does this thing. I mean, you could do this. I mean, seriously. You want to be a good viz dev artist? Just go look at Eyvind Earl for a couple months. Spend 6 months on it and start reproducing the stuff and incorporate that into your style, and you'll be amazed at the responses you'll get in your work. I mean, look at this. It's just a bunch of lines going across. And look at this. And who was it that did? A couple of the recent studios. I think Sony Pictures Animation copied a lot of this stuff when they were doing I think Surf's Up Mountains had a lot of this, and there are a couple other some DreamWorks productions had some of his styles in there as well. But I mean, look at the unique flavor to this, and look at the, talk about stylistic and caricature all being combined into one. Look at how beautiful that tree is. And he did a bunch of these, by the way. Bunch of variations with a lot of graphic approaches, and I love this. It's almost a silkscreen feeling of look at how it like goes dark and gets lighter as it comes up here. And then you have the other little shadows overlapping, and you have the way he signed his name. I mean, it's just everything about his work just looks so fascinating to me. It's hard to find some of his high-res images because you can buy his prints, and they're still for sale. So a lot of the high-res stuff, it's really hard to find on the internet. Part of this, look at that. In Photoshop, you can just create a shape with a marquee tool, right? You could come in here and put a really basic shape of a tree, and then you could either load up a channel and work around that, come in and just stamp all around that, and you could get this kind of effect extremely fast. Now look at this, just simple, like little brush lines in the back here. And this,
Like he had a giant stamp and he just
yeah, doesn't it? It sort of looks like, some of these actually look like he even had a, what do you call it, a press, like, when you do t-shirts, and
Silkscreen.
yes, thank you, a silk screen effect, because some of these, he gets the gradients in there and the color, going from light to dark, or from, here he's got this red blended in, sort of fades off, and even some of the edges can be really crisp. It's just really fascinating work. And then again, very stylized. So it's, sometimes when I get stuck in things I'm doing, I go back, and there are a couple artists I like to look at. One of them is Chuck Jones, because he had a way of simplifying things. And then, Chuck Jones did for the character development stuff that he did. But then I like looking at his, oh God, what's his name? The guy, thank you, I was going to say Mr. Noble. Maurice Noble, who did a lot of the environments, okay, and he stylized them and had a lot of fun with them. But so when I look at this piece from Eyvind Earl, I look at that and I'm like, man, some of that's getting really similar to, what Maurice Noble was doing, in terms of the shape language and everything. Let's see if I can zoom in there. Some of this stuff is just, it's just immaculate. Some of the prints they have they're absolutely gorgeous. That's a lot of fun. Great stuff.
other than the style, it looks like you just took it right from the movie.
Yeah. Look at that. And this is where, look at how awesome that is. See, this is where he's, I mean, look at that. And I'm like, now he's taking real graphic elements. He's getting coarse shadows and reflective light in there, and he's dealing with the time of day with light and shadows, and there's foreground, midground, background, graphic elements, but there's a simplicity to it, I mean, look at this tree back here. They're just like simplified trees laying in there. And look, this is literally like if you had all you had to do is create one of those limbs, right? And then you could just flop it on the other side and create a brush that's a tree, and then you just go in there and like stamp, literally like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then look, it's what in Photoshop, this would be so much fun. Look, that's just a gradient from dark to light. So I love looking at this stuff, and I learn from this and mimic it because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot in here you could apply. I really like how he does this when he has a huge change and a contrasting and complementary colors here. Look at how he puts those little dots in to like create a little bit of a gradient effect, just sort of around the corner. And then look at the little highlights here, hitting that darker. So, again, we have a warm light coming through here. The warm light's hitting the white snow. So that's going to be, so what happens when a warm light hits a dark colored object? Well, it's not going to be the same yellow like this, but it's going to be another form of orange. But that's just because the tree has a darker midtone. And look, he just pulls it off so nicely. And then even these shapes in here are just gorgeous, right? That's fantastic. I know it's a little lost, a little bit of the colors fading out there because it's a low res image, but look at the first thing when I look at that, I see these lines that pull me in here, and I look at these big shapes, and then I look back here and just the way this gradient comes down. Look at this, we're going from a warm up here, and look at how the transition all the way to a cool down here. That's hard to do, that's hard to pull off, and he's doing this with a freaking paintbrush. You know, I mean, I'm sure he's probably doing it with washes and slight grades, but we're not talking where he just pulled up the gradient tool in Photoshop and just dragged a line across and did it in what takes us 5 seconds to do. He sat there and probably did it as a master and had it come out together very nicely, you know. And look at this. I mean, the way the trees are in there. I mean, any one of you could look at that piece and put a spin on something that you're going to do for environments in this class. The only thing, if I was there, this is really horrible for me to say, but if I was there, I'd be like, scale, put in something to dictate scale, you know, put in a little guy on a horse or something. But I mean, these are just beautiful the way that they are, you know. But imagine, you know, having a character up here on a horse and then, you know, 2 goofy knights and then a princess. And it looks like they're on a journey and they're about to enter this weird forest or something, right? I mean, you could easily do that. And this is just, you know, when he got to this level of work, just the things that he was doing, and this is some of the artwork that he had in galleries for sale. And you can buy prints of this stuff. They're very expensive. But he did this, he had a fascination, did a lot of stuff with rolling hillsides and plains and trees. You know, and again, that exposure, like we have the plein air painting class here, right? Exposure to being outside and to studying some of the really great things that we have here in California are the mountains and the hills, rolling mountains and hills everywhere. Unfortunately, a couple of the places where we have them, there's like animals there that'll kill you. Okay, so you have to be very careful because I was going to suggest if you ever wanted to, I know Joe does this sometimes and a bunch of other artists I know, they go up to Laguna and there's great areas to paint there. In the back here of, if you go up Fullerton and bank a little bit to the right where you hit sort of Brea, you can access the very front end of Chino Park. And there's a road and a bike path that goes all the way down into Chino where the ranger station, and you can walk, and that even connects to parts of Yorba Linda there. Beautiful rolling grassy hills. You don't even feel like you're in California. However, though, tons of rattlesnakes. That's where that lady in Yorba Linda almost got eaten by a mountain lion that was dragging her, and some other lady beat it off, right? So if you go back there, go as a group, and the best time to be back there is like early morning when the coyotes are going back to sleep, or when the sun's going down.
Coyotes hunt in the morning.
Well, they hunt. That's what I mean. They're going back from hunting.
No, that's when they go out.
They go out to hunt?
Yeah, they're still out then.
But when it gets really bright, they're going back.
Start to go
Well, maybe
forward.
early morning. Because I see them in my neighborhood all the time. I come out and they're walking around. And then as soon as the sun pops up, they poof. So the 2 gorgeous times to look at our hills and mountains are when the suns are coming up. When the sun is coming up and when the sun is going down. And I've been out there before in my mountain bike when the sun's starting to dip. And it's absolutely just gorgeous back there. You don't even feel like you're in California. You have these beautiful hills like this, okay? Just love, look at that barn. That's awesome. I forget part of the specs on him. I know he went up to a lot of, if you go up to mid-California from Santa Barbara and above, there's a lot, the environments get really beautiful. And one of the things I do, I take my kids, we go up to Pismo Beach and camp on the beach and ride quads, right? And a lot of times on part of that drive, there's just this gorgeous, just rolling hills and these weird rocks and just trees all over. And even parts of Northern California look like this. You guys are younger, you have a lot of time, more spare time, right? If you get a chance, just, going up and looking like at Carmel and driving to Northern California, it's absolutely beautiful. There's so much to see. But look at, that's another, oops. What did I do? Uh-oh. Did I just delete it?
Oh, no. So,
Oh, there it is. I hit Command Z and it came back. And there's another beautiful piece right there. So look at big trees with like this mossy stuff on it. And look at that back, and then the part of the black diminishes. And look at that forest in the back, right? Look at how immense that is. I mean, look at the scale of it compared to what you're looking at in the foreground. It's ginormous, right? Huge. That's a freaking Christmas card right there if I ever saw one, right? What could you learn from studying that right there and making a copy of that? You learn the method and the approach of how he did it. He started with a gradient in the back. He blocked in a black silhouette of the tree. He then came back in and he put a mid-grade blue for the snow, which is the local tone value of that snow with no light on it. Then he put the highlights on it. And remember that little dot effect thing he's doing? So he's doing it here and he's doing it there too to make those transitions read nice. So he put the little dot thing and then probably came in at the very end and did what? And took a bright little yellow and put little highlights for the little ends of the leaves. Okay? So and then, after getting the snow in here, look at the highlights painted, and then he probably painted all this, and then he came in and painted in. So why is that important to me? I just labeled off 6 steps. So that's 6 steps that you could just take right there in that progression and then apply to something digital and to some of your own work. I mean, all you have to do is if you paint one of those trees in Photoshop, you can copy, paste, distort, warp, adjust, and create that tree in the back, which means then you could flip it over the side. And then imagine right here in the middle having 3 of your characters like standing there, like looking up in this giant tree. That's right, you just created a piece of development art, indicating a surrounding environment in relationship to a couple characters that you're working on. Okay, beautiful stuff, all right? I love this. Look at the shadows he's doing. Parallel, right? Where's the sun? Out of the picture plane. Yeah. Okay. Look at that. What do you guys think?
It's amazing.
Isn't it just totally amazing? So much to learn from that, but there's such a simple feel to that. And then this was some of the production stills that he was doing. Some of the environments that they were placing animated characters into. So let's sort of wrap it up here so then we can jump over. Because again, the reason why I wanted you to see this stuff is I want you to make that correlation and see the difference between looking at artists that you can use to replicate style from. There's nothing wrong with that. It's so funny. Something happened in this country in like 3rd grade. It probably happened all over the world. And someone was like, "You're a tracer. You're a copier." And that's where it started. It was like 3rd grade. You copied something. You traced it. And that was like horrible. Well, it's different when you get older because now you're not copying. You're trying to mimic the steps and find the techniques. And if you can write a book, your own, not a book, but if you could remember your little black book I tell you guys to keep of your notes, animation, jobs, requirements, new software, trends in the industry, contacts, all that stuff in a 1-inch notebook, right? And in a 1-inch notebook somewhere in there, you should have a little tab, and it should be on styles. And you should have an image of Eyvind Earl, an image of MaryBlair, and you should break down the amount of steps it takes to get that piece done. So that way you can apply it to your own work. You can't remember all that stuff. There's too many artists, too many styles, and too many variations out there. But what you can do is you can take a look at great work like this. Look at that. And you can figure out how to piece that together. I mean, part of that is literally as simple as just creating basic shapes and putting gradients in it. That's it. It's not that much more complicated than that. I mean, look at this. Could you imagine if he had access to the Photoshop brushes and he could create a bunch of lines like that and select it and just go in there? He had to go in and paint all these little strokes himself. Can you imagine if he just went in there and he had what he would do if he sat down and someone taught him Photoshop in like 6 months? How much fun this guy would have? Look at that. That's gorgeous. Look at the atmosphere. Perspective change. Beautiful. I hate to speed through this, but another great piece. I love that 1-point perspective stuff that he's doing, where he has all the lines coming in. Gives me a couple ideas. Well, not in a bad way. I was actually sketching something like, we've talked about the importance of 1-point perspective and how it's used in staging all the time. So I was working on something at home where I have this like huge base. It's like this star base setup or whatever, but it's at a really low horizon line level. So you see all this, there's a very quick transition. And that's what's happening right here is, look, you're literally a 1/4 inch off the page. So the transition from here to here is great. Okay. But then he sort of ignores that by having these trees. I mean, if this tree was back here, you could measure the scale and see the difference. and then it just really makes everything else behind there, these other trees, they feel just enormous. You know what I mean? Giant in scale because of that, because of what he's doing in there. Okay, just beautiful stuff. Look at that simplicity of all that in the back. Okay, gorgeous work. So if I was you, go on to Pinterest today. I love this one because look at that. Look at the curve in the tree. You will look this way, right? And he just curves that branch and look, points you right back there. Notice, ready? Curve, 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 curve in the tree, curve. Look at the cloud. Curve. It's all the same freaking curve being repeated and indicated again in different places, just slightly turned. So what does that mean? In composition study, it's the same theme repeated. So that's unity. So he's establishing unity in a composition by repeating the same curve and flow, that same flow that continues through. But this is without a doubt, you know, this to me is like that the little part of Beethoven's Ninth where you hear the oboe in the background, right at that high point, and the oboe comes in. It's just a little part real quick. There's this little curve of the tree right here, and the way that you're sort of coming here and it just pushes you right back in here. You hit this cloud, you come right back in here. Look, you almost drop down. You flow right back here. You hit the wall, and boom, and you're back up. He keeps you inside that composition, moving back and forth. And then, by the way, he gets an A+ for scale. See? So you put the little cows in there. So I look at that and I'm like, oh yes, I knew he'd put scale in eventually, right?
Right.
Look, it's Ted Cruz. No, I'm just kidding. Look at that. Look at how much fun that is. So, you know, every time I look at something like this and I see the simplicity of that, I'm like, I could take that and put this spin on it and then it would look this way for me. You know what I mean? Or I could make it work in another avenue. And look at that. Look at how neat that is. With the castle on fire. These guy's down here with his sword. He's stuck in all these vines and he's trying to get all, you know what I mean? Beautiful. Already saw that one. Okay. All right. So that's Eyvind Earl. I thought I'd show you this too because if you go to Wiki Art, there's a bunch of his work up there, and some of it, every now and then, if you look around, and if you go type in Eyvind Earl paintings for sale, you can find a bunch of his prints that are available still. People have them, they're for sale. So if you ever wanted to own one and have one, you know, right in front of you, you can do that still to this day, which is pretty cool. But I already know because I've looked online, they're expensive. Okay, all right, so now, do you understand why I wanted to show you that work? Is I think this artist right here, Victoria Ying, I think she's really talented, and I think she's quite amazing, and she's a great little storyteller. She does really good work that encompasses a lot of style and change. She's just out of arts, or she's been out, I don't know the exact year she got out, but you can look her up. She has a blog and other stuff, but to me, I mean, she's like a new artist. I mean, she's at Disney now. I mean, what's going to be amazing to see where she's going to land in the next, 6 or 10 years of her life. You know what I mean? I really like doing this so much. One of the things I always wanted to do was I wanted to grab my trusty little video camera and I wanted to go around and because I've always been a guy in the middle my whole life where I know lots of people. And I know so many people I've worked with. Like, I want to go sit down with Michael and interview him. I want to go back and see, Tom Bancroft, sit down with him and interview him. Or it'd be so cool to call these people and just go, hey, can I interview you and put it up on a blog? So you can just have 10. Huh?
Yeah, who is this?
Yeah. No, it would be fun. But problem is, it's just part of them would be like, no, I can't talk about that production. Or yeah, I know. Why does that guy keep? Yeah. Do you know who this guy is? Who's parked outside, breathing heavy on his window? No.
Playing in the rain.
Yeah. He keeps calling me. Well, you never know. Something like that could actually go the opposite way, where you do a couple with a couple people, and you have a really cool site, like level up, and then people are contacting you going, hey, I'd love to be on your channel. I'd love to be, you guys seen Level Up, right? No? Okay, we'll talk about that later then. All right. Look at this stuff here. Let's see if I can zoom in each one of these. Beautiful combination of that simplicity in design, but then again, look at this. I mean, we've got foreground, midground, background, light coming through, nice color. See if I can zoom in a little bit more so I can get in. Same thing in here, nice storytelling, nice little piece. I look at that, and that reminds me of an illustration from one of the Golden Books, doesn't it? Totally does. Good stuff. And you know it's funny, because I know you guys don't know this. Who else? There's another female out there who has a style just like this who also works at Disney. Brittany Lee. Very exactly. And there's also another female whose dad was huge at Disney. Claire King. Okay. So, and I think if I'm right, there's a little group of all of them. Because they had the women in animation thing, right?
Wasn't it the Lovely? It was the Lovely book.
Yeah, exactly, the Lovely Book, exactly. The ladies of, yeah, exactly. And I saw that. Look at her sketchbook. Look at how gorgeous those characters are in there. Look at what she's doing. She's looking at some little fashion bookie there of a character and putting her version of it. Oh my God, that's tracing. So what? You copy something and you transform it. Look at that beautiful drawing right there. Look at the confidence it takes to get to that level. Okay. I like the pen she's doing, by the way. Great idea. Where did we learn that from? Drawing with a light pen underneath and coming back with a darker pen on top. Okay, Patrick does it. Numerous artists from graphic design industry and entertainment, they do it with markers, all other types of variations. Sketch light and then draw on top with another pen to get your hard lines to read. Okay, there, look at that. She's drawing with green, coming back with blue. That's awesome. She's working with super bright colors. That's really cool. I mean, I look at that and I get inspired. I'm like, I mean, this is one of the things I love about teaching is I've never thought of that combo right there. I've been using Tombow markers all the time in my sketchbook, but I'm always using like tones. I've never thought of pulling out a bright freaking yellow and going over it with a red. And look at the result. There's a lot of great contrast you can get. I'm always working with like light tones and 20 to 40 gray versions of blues and whatever. I never thought of going the complete other way to a saturated color. So I look at that and I feel like, wow, that's something I would love to apply and put into my own sketchbook and see where it takes me. I don't know if Mex, that color would really be too exciting, but you know, for character sketching and gesture sketching, I think it would be fantastic. Okay, that's awesome. That's something she did for Con. Look at how nice that is. It's a really cool environment. That's really cool. There's a certain simplicity feel to that. I love the silhouettes of the trees, and then I love that the rough in the background. It's just like the other trees. It would be in there, an atmospheric perspective, and then the highlight is like bam, just right here, and keeps your eye focused right in the middle there. It's a gorgeous little study too. So, if any of you here ever want to work at Disney or have that and see yourself being in features one day, here's somebody that's working there right now. You're basically looking at her portfolio. So it gives you an idea of the type of work you have to have and the storytelling ability, the framing, and even part of the simplicity of the design. So maybe they're not, you know, maybe Disney Features isn't looking for somebody who renders out everything. Well, I'm sure they have different stylists. As the other day we looked at, you know, what's his name? Lang?
T.S. Lechner? No,
Ryan. We looked at Ryan, and he has a much more developed style. But I like seeing stuff like this. There's a certain he used to. That's one of the books she did, The Art of Victoria Ying, Freckles. Okay. Have you guys ever seen her at CTN? Okay.
Usually there. With
Huh?
her husband, Mike, you know,
Yeah.
I have a lanyard from her.
Cool. Great stuff. Look at that. I like some of her environments we're looking. They're a lot of fun. They're really nice. That's gorgeous. That's a nice piece too. Oop. Look at this. Look at the scale of the character in the middle. It's a nice staging point. Colors are really cool. I love the light source coming in. I really like this little transition that she's doing here with the bright light coming in. Now you're fading over there, and how she incorporated that right here into the middle where you have some of the warms in there. And then you have the cools sort of complementing each other. I thought that was really nicely done. Excellent. Okay, that's it. So thanks to Victoria. So if you get a chance, just write those 3 names down. Create a little folder. If you like, if you want, I can always give you my folder. I'd be more than happy to copy and paste all the documents I have here. If you spent more time, you could probably find more of Eyvind Earl's stuff up. But some amazing work. So that'll end it for our artist for the week, and we will come up with a new artist for next week.